Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo 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 Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Hare Krishna. Welcome to today's class. We are reading from Srimad Bhagavad-Gita as it is, chapter number 13, entitled Nature, the Enjoyer and Consciousness. And we are reading verse number 4. Verse number 4. Tat kshetram yachat yadritcha yad vikariyatas tyayat sacho yo yad vibhavascha tat samasena matsrinu. Tat, that, kshetram, field of activities, yat, what, cha, also, yadrik, as it is, cha, also, yat, having what, vikari, changes, yataha, from which, cha, also, yat, what, saha, he, cha, also, yaha, who, yat, having what, prabhavaha, influence, cha, also, tat, that, samasena, in summary, may, from me, shrinu, understand. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Now please hear my brief description of this field of activities and how it is constituted, what its changes are, whence it is produced, who that knower of the field activities is, and what his influences are. Please repeat. Now please hear my brief description of this field of activities and how it is constituted, what its changes are, whence it is produced, who that knower of the field of activities is, and what his influences are. Purport. The Lord is describing the field of activities and the knower of the field of activities in their constitutional positions. One has to know how this body is constituted, the materials of which this body is made, under whose control this body is working, how the changes are taking place, where from the changes are coming, what the causes are, what the reasons are, what the ultimate goal of the individual soul is, and what the actual form of the individual soul is. One should also know the distinction between the individual living soul and the supersoul, their influences, their potentials, etc. One just has to understand this Bhagavad-Gita directly from the description given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all this will be clarified. But one should be careful not to consider the Supreme Personality of Godhead in every body to be one with the individual soul, the jiva. This is something like equating the potent and the impotent. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmanitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandayaham Sri Guruho Sri Yuta Parakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrijatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti-vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Tat kshetram yatcha yadrikcha yadvikari yachastayat sacha yo yad prabhavascha tat samasena me shrunu. Now please hear my brief description of this field of activities, how it is constituted, what its changes are, whence it is produced, who that knower of the field of activities is, and what his influences are. So in our class yesterday there was a question about why Krishna is now going on to describe all this gyan, why he's describing all this, when at the conclusion of the last chapter, actually from chapters 6 through 12, Krishna is talking about himself as the Supreme Personality Godhead and the potency of devotional service. So why we're now coming back to look at this gyan? So I thought that would, because of the way this verse is, Krishna is saying what he's going to describe, we could have a look at that. So I'm referring to Burijan Prabhu's book, which is called Surrender Unto Me, where he gives an idea of the flow of the Bhagavad-Gita and how it comes about. So according to him, the connection between chapter 12 and chapter 13 comes right back in verse 12:7, where Krishna has promised to redeem his devotees. So let's have a look at that verse. 12:7. So, yetu sarvani karmani mayi sanyasya matparaha ananyenaiva yogena mam dhyayanta upasate teshamaham samudhatar mrichu samsara sagarat bhavami na charat parata maya veshita chetasam. Those who worship me, giving up all their activities unto me and being devoted to me without deviation, engaged in devotional service and always meditating upon me, having fixed their minds upon me, O son of Pritha, for them I am the swift deliverer from the ocean of birth and death. So then Burijan is explaining that Krishna's promise that he becomes the swift deliverer, Samudharata, Aham Samudharata, I am the deliverer. from this mrityu samsara, this ocean of birth, death. So Krishna is doing this by giving us jnana. Prabhu yesterday was saying, so Krishna's he's already displayed his opulences in the 11th chapter. He showed the universal form. Arjuna has already accepted, you are Param Brahma, you are Param Dhamma, you are Supreme Personality of Godhead. But still that doesn't tell us how to act. In the 12th chapter also Krishna explained devotional service. He gave a whole breakdown after this verse of a guideline of how to act. Fix your mind upon me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and engage your intelligence in me. Thus you will live with me always without a doubt. Now for most of us, we don't find that so easy. We've taken to this process of chanting Hare Krishna. But to fix our minds on Krishna all the time, live with him always, is not so easy. Because of so many lifetimes of conditioning. We're engaged in devotional service. We're chanting the holy name. This is the best process. In fact, it's the only process that will work in this age of Kali. But still we have trouble with it. And for this reason, Krishna is now coming on to describe some jnana, to help us get free of this entanglement. So as we go through, we'll try and have a look through it, a little bit of how the progress works. So it begins by Arjuna actually asking questions. Where Arjuna got these questions from is not so clear, because Krishna had just been speaking about how the devotees are very dear to him. And then Arjuna turned around and said, I want to know about Prakriti, nature, Purusha, the enjoyer, and the field and the knower of the field, and knowledge and the object of knowledge. But this knowledge is for us. This knowledge is to understand how we are bound in this material world. So as we start in this 13th chapter with this knowledge of who we are, our distinction from the body, how we come into contact with the material nature, and how we become entrapped in it. Then in the 14th chapter we have the modes of material nature, how they influence us, and sometimes we can experience that according to our association, according to which situation we're in. Sometimes we act well. One class I was listening to my Guru Maharaj, he said, okay, so you're all sitting here listening to me, so now you're in the mode of goodness. So this is nice, we're all in the mode of goodness right now. But when some other influence comes upon us, then the modes change. So we have to understand these modes and understand how by our association, not just the people, but all the environment and everything around us, by association even with our own mind, this influences what modes are pulling us and how they're pulling us and what direction they're pulling us in. Then in the 15th chapter, Krishna gives the example in the beginning of the banyan tree as an example for the whole material world, how entangling a banyan tree is. If I bought my book, I have a picture of a big banyan tree. So the banyan tree, most of you probably know a banyan tree, but there is one I had the picture of it. It's something like 6 square miles in area, and nobody knows which is the original tree. So a banyan tree is a particularly difficult tree to find your way around. You get in inside this tree, and you can go for kilometers and kilometers, and there's roots hanging down and there's trunks going up, but you don't know which one is the original tree, and you don't know where is the original root. So this banyan tree is very difficult, and so Krishna gives the example of this banyan tree. It's like the material world, but it's upside down. It's like a reflection on the water. So Srila Prabhupada explains from our acharyas that this reflection is reflected on our desires. So this we must also understand. The distortion of a reflection is due to our desires. It's not due to any cause beyond us. This, even in the 13th chapter, Krishna explains that it's us as living entities. We're responsible for our own enjoyment and suffering. The modes of nature give us this field of activities, and but because of our desires, we get entangled. And because of our desires, we can't see where we're going in this one banyan tree, the material world. Then later in the 15th chapter, Krishna also explains more about how we're entangled with, according to how we're attached to the different senses. By our desires, by our activities, we attract a certain type of body which has a certain type of senses, and those senses limit us. Prabhupada here gives an example of how the child has a playground, and he thinks he has great influence in his playground. If he's a rich man's child, he has a toy car to play with, he has something else to play with, and he thinks he's doing very well. But he's limited because he can only move inside the playground. Prabhupada also, no, it might be Burijan. Burijan also gives the example of an earthworm. An earthworm has an even more limited field of experience. He goes around in the earth finding something to eat. When it rains and the earth gets flooded, he comes up to the top. And when the water goes down, he goes back down in the soil again. So his field of influence is very small. His limit of his senses is very less. Kartamisha Mataji was talking yesterday about the living entities deep in the ocean, how they have a completely different set of experiences and different set of senses. So understanding this connection of ours with the senses in our body is very important to understanding how we're bound by it. And of course, even as devotees, understanding this is very important, because the way our false ego works is that we think that the way we think is the way everyone else should think. There's a Sanskrit saying even, Atmavan manyate jagat. Whatever is in our mind, we think the whole world is like that. And so that leads to a lot of conflict when we meet people who don't think exactly the same way we do. So we have to also understand deeply how our particular set of senses, our particular body is conditioning us to think in a certain way. But other people have different set of senses, different mind, different intelligence, and they will think in a different way. And we have to learn to tolerate. And that's part of our progress in devotional service. We also heard that yesterday, to tolerate. Our one advice for everybody is to tolerate. Because we have to understand this. Now I just wanted to go through a little bit some of these verses. So in today's verse, the Acharyas point out that Krishna is raising the 5 points. He says, please hear my brief description of this field of activity, how it is constituted, what its changes are, whence it is produced, and who the knower of the field of activities is, and what his influences are. So according to Burijan, who has listed them separately, and he said how actually Krishna goes on to answer these as well. So these 5 points come up. How the body is constituted is explained mostly in text 6, where Krishna will say the 5 great elements, the false ego, intelligence, the unmanifested, the 10 senses in the mind, and the 5 sense objects. So this you'll find in many places in Prabhupada's writings. This is called Sankhya. It's different from the atheist Kapila Sankhya. The Sankhya is taught by Kapila Muni in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, where the whole material elements are analyzed. Prabhupada explains in the purport how you get the five senses, the five sense objects: earth, water, air, fire, ether, false ego, mind, and intelligence. 10 senses, the mind. Beyond that, the soul and the super soul. And they constitute 24 elements. So this is, we were talking yesterday about the painter, the painting, and the easel. So these elements must be the easel, because it's upon these elements that the material body is then constituted. The second point in this verse, according to Burijan, is, according to Krishna, he says, what changes the bodies undergo? So this is answered in 7 and 20. Now in one place I was noting that it's emphasized that this word, this changes, which we read in the Sanskrit was called vikara, actually only applies to the body. Neither the soul nor the super soul goes through these changes. This changes is only about the body and these gross elements. So the changes that the body undergoes, explained in text 7 and text 20. So text 7, which is combined with text 6, desire, hatred, happiness, distress, the aggregate, the life symptoms and convictions. All these are considered in summary to the interactions of the field of activities. So this, Krishna will explain later on, is our responsibility. These are the interactions of the modes of material nature, but it is our responsibility whether we experience happiness and distress, desire or hatred. There are many theories about this. Some people talk about providence or fate or our destiny or our karma, how that maybe we're controlled and we actually have no choice about how we act. Because in some ways it's very difficult for us to act beyond the modes of nature in the body that we're in. There are certain things that constrain us. But Krishna has given us this minute independence. As he has independence, he has given us minute independence. And mainly that will come out through our desires. We may be confined by our material body and senses and by our previous conditioning, but if we desire to change our habits, that's the first step towards changing them. If any one of you have ever had to change habits, you will know it's not so easy. Something you've been doing for a long time, it's not so easy to change. You have to gradually change. And especially if you ever had training in controlling your emotions, especially anger and things like that. If you go to some anger management course, they will teach you. So even Prabhupada talks about it. First you become aware. So our first stage is to become aware of the habits that we've developed, of the things that we're conditioned to do by the modes of nature. And once we become aware of it, then we can't instantly change it, because our subconscious mind acts so much faster than our conscious mind. We get angry and we say something, and then a second later, I shouldn't have said that. Because our subconscious mind is pre-programmed to act in a certain way. And it acts in this certain way without us thinking. It's automatic. And then later we think, oh, I shouldn't have said it like that. I could have said it differently. I could have waited a few seconds and thought of something better to say. So the first step is to become conscious that I want to change some habit. We have this desire to improve, to get up to this mode of goodness, which is going to be helpful for us. So then gradually, the more we become aware of it, then gradually we become aware of what's happening a little earlier and a little earlier. And it will come to the point where we can actually stop before we say something that we shouldn't say. And in that way the habit can be changed by retraining it. So this understanding of how this modes work can be very helpful for us. Understanding the nature of our association, our environment, and that can also help us to raise our modes of nature. So these changes happening, these interactions of the body, And verse 20 is also discussed under the changes the body undergoes. Material nature and the living entity should be understood to be beginningless. Their transformations and the modes of matter are products of material nature. So these transformations come about as a result of material nature. The third point that comes out of Krishna's text here is how, when and where the body is produced. So that was already a little bit covered in text 6, where it said about the great elements and the senses and how they combine to form the field of activities of the body. And it's also covered in verse 21 and 22. 21 says, nature is said to be the cause of all material causes and effects, whereas the living entity is the cause of the various sufferings and enjoyments in this world. So the cause of the body is nature. The cause of our suffering and enjoyment is the living entity, is us ourselves. 22. The living entity in material nature thus follows the ways of life, enjoying the three modes of nature. This is due to that his association with that material nature. Thus he meets with good and evil amongst various species. So this again shows the changes of the body. So not just within this lifetime we're changing body, but I'm getting another body, it will also be different according to the modes of nature that we're associating with, and the activities that we do in this lifetime will determine our next life. And thus we come with good and evil. So we think by our own activities we can fix things in this life. We think we can make things better and solve all our problems. But actually Krishna is explaining to us that the material world is not designed like that. We think we can fix things, but actually we can't. It's designed so we get past one misery and we'll cause another misery. The fourth point in this verse today is the identity. Krishna says he will reveal the identity of the knower of the fields. So in verses 14 through 18 and verse 23, Krishna is talking about, he starts, one verse he talks a little bit about the soul, and then he's talking mainly about the super soul. The identity of the knower of the field. 14. Everywhere his hands and legs, his eyes, heads and faces, his ears everywhere. In this way the super soul exists, pervading everything. So Burijan explains that these verses sound a little bit like the Upanishads, and sounds a little bit like we're trying to describe the impersonal Brahman. Oh, he's pervading everywhere, he's got hands and legs and ears and eyes everywhere. But Prabhupada in his purport explains it a different way. He says that Krishna is acting through his devotees, and they have hands and legs and ears and eyes everywhere because there are so many of them. So therefore they are acting, and they are acting on behalf of Krishna. Supreme truth exists outside and inside of all living beings, moving and non-moving. Because he is subtle, he is beyond the power of the material senses. Although far, far away, he is near to all. And then in verse 23 is a nice verse. We'll just read that one. Upadrashtanumantascha Bharata Bhokta Maheshwara Paramatmaiti Chapyukto Dehesmin Purusha Uparaha. Yet in this body there is another, a transcendental enjoyer, who is the Lord, the Supreme Proprietor, who exists as the overseer and permitter, who is known as the Super Soul. So this is talking about this supreme knower of the field, the Super Soul, and what his influences are, how he exists as the permitter for everything we do. So the fifth point Krishna was talking about was this influences of the knower of the field. verse 15, the Supersoul is the original source of all senses, yet he is without senses. He is unattached, although he is the maintainer of all living beings. He transcends the modes of nature, and at the same time he is the master of all modes of nature. 17. Although the Supersoul appears to be divided amongst all living beings, he is never divided. He is situated as one. Although he is the maintainer of every living entity, it is to be understood that he devours and develops all. And 18. He is the source of light of all luminous objects. He is beyond the darkness of matter and is unmanifested. He is knowledge, he is the object of knowledge, and he is the goal of knowledge. He is situated in everyone's heart. So this is the description of the painter in our analogy yesterday. We had the easel, the painting, and the painter. So Krishna here in these verses is described how he is the master of the modes of nature. He is the maintainer of all living entities. And he develops and develops all. He's in control of everything that happens in this material world. So if we see this analogy of the easel is the gross elements that become made into, that support the painting. And the painter is like the Supersoul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's actually combining. Now later on in the purport, Prabhupada will explain something that goes with this analogy nicely as well. He explains the modes of nature, how we have three modes of nature that can be seen as yellow is seen as the mode of goodness, red is the mode of passion, and then blue as the mode of ignorance. So Prabhupada is explaining that, yes, these modes are very clear. There's goodness, passion, and ignorance. But actually none of us are just in one particular mode of nature. So then he said you combine this one mode with the two other modes. And so 3 times 3, and then you get 9. And so then you combine 9 times 3, you get 27. 9 times 9, you get 81. And so like this, the combination keeps increasing and increasing. So accordingly, these modes of nature, they're filling up our painting with different colors. So in this way, we get influenced in different ways, and then the color will change. The combination of the modes of nature change, and the colors on our painting will change. So in that way, we can put some life in this analogy, which was a little confusing for me before. So just a few more things I wanted to cover from Burijan's book. There's some nice places where he talks about this importance of this knowledge. So in tomorrow's verse, Krishna starts quoting from the Vedanta Sutra and various sages when he's talking about this knowledge. So Prabhupada is explaining in the purport how, although Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he knows everything, he designed everything, he creates everything. He is this original guru, but still, in order to show how full this knowledge is, he's also quoting from Sadhu and Shastra. So that gives us our formula for success, to combine the 3 aspects of Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. So Krishna is doing this by his own demonstration. Burijan says, Krishna is explaining, no, this is Prabhupada. Prabhupada says, Krishna is explaining this most controversial point regarding the duality and non-duality of the soul and supersoul by referring to scripture, the Vedanta, which is accepted as authority. So because in yesterday's verse he said, this is my opinion. In tomorrow's verse he says, but the sadhus, the great sages, also say this, and the Vedanta says this. The next point I've highlighted is that we should keep in our mind that although Krishna is the maintainer of all of us, and he's the painter of this painting, he's not actually responsible for it. As it says in this verse here, the the living entity is responsible for his happiness and suffering. So we can't say, Krishna, you designed this system, it's your fault that I'm suffering. We have to remember that it's arranged by karma through the agency of Maya. But the karma is acting because of our desires and what we've done. In verses 8 to 12, we shall start on Wednesday and go through to Saturday, these items of knowledge are being described. So these items of knowledge, Prabhupada is explaining, are the process that will carry us to transcendence. He's saying that some people take these items of knowledge as being a material knowledge acquiring system, but it's actually the means to get out of entanglement. Okay, the next point comes in verse 19. So in verse 19, Krishna says, "Thus the field of activities, the body, knowledge and the knowable have been summarily described by me. Only my devotees can understand this thoroughly and thus attain to my nature." So the important point here is Krishna's doing this explanation for us as devotees. He's not doing it for everybody else, he's doing it for us. Only devotees will be able to understand it. Thus, three items have been described: the field of activities, the body, the process of its understanding, and both the soul and supersoul. It is especially described here that only the unalloyed devotees of the Lord can understand these three items clearly. So for these devotees, Bhagavad-Gita is fully useful. It is they who can attain the supreme goal, the nature of the Supreme Lord Krishna. In other words, only devotees and not others can understand Bhagavad-Gita and derive the result. That's Prabhupada's purport. And there was one other thing at the end. Okay, and the summary in the last verse of this chapter. The purport of this 13th chapter is that one should know the distinction between the body, the owner of the body, and the supersoul. One should recognize the process of liberation as described in verses 8 through 12. Then one can go on to the supreme destination. And just one more point I had from the next verse, from the next chapter, about the modes of material nature. In verse 14 too, Krishna says, "By becoming fixed in this knowledge, one can attain to the transcendental nature like my own. Thus established, one is not born at the time of creation, nor disturbed at the time of dissolution." Because Krishna describes knowledge of this material nature, of the modes of nature, in verse 1 of the 14th chapter. "Again I shall declare to you the supreme wisdom, the best of all knowledge, knowing which all sages have attained the supreme perfection." So we have a habit to think that this knowledge of the material body and the material modes is just boring and we can ignore it and just be devotees. But Krishna is saying this knowledge is supreme, so we should pay attention to it and study it. So the comment on this second verse from Baladev Vidyabhushan, Baladev Vijayabhushan stated that this knowledge was attained by worshipping the feet of our spiritual master. Why? Because development of a service mood, as opposed to an enjoying mood, shatters the glue that binds us to the material world. Thinking of ourselves as my Guru's servant and fixing his order as our life and soul frees us from Maya. The modes may dictate a variety of allurements to us, but devotees surrendered to their Guru follow the Guru's instructions and do not heed the pushings of the modes. The attitude of devotion and service, not merely the ability, like that of a jnani, to discriminate between the modes and the pure soul, carries them to perfection. So that's a nice conclusion of how to get out of these material modes. If we become surrendered to our Guru in devotional service, then that's our path out of the material modes. So we've got some time for some discussion or some questions, if anybody has some. Hare Krishna Prabhu. Karbajana Prabhu. Ha.
In the beginning explaining that Guru Maharaj said that we are in the mode of goodness. You see, when we are associating with devotees, hearing about Krishna Katha or taking darshan of the Lord, we are all in the mode of goodness. But
Hopefully. If our mind is with us.
Yeah, mind is with us. But at least when we are taking darshan, whether the mind is going anywhere, but at least we are seeing Lord. So that it comes in the mode of goodness. But as soon as we go out of the temple, then our senses are looking for something different, that is in the mode of passion and ignorance. So these things we should understand, and Lord here also in the end is saying that we should take the center of our Guru. So Guru is teaching us that how we should associate and how we should be 24 hours engaged in Krishna consciousness. This is the point, comment I have.
Good. Thank you, Prabhu. Anything else? Any other comments? Any questions? Oh.
Hare Krishna, Labangalata. Yesterday also the mother of Prabhupada disciple was explaining that something and voluntary, devotional service is voluntary.
Yes, devotional service is voluntary. We have to commit to it. Thank you. Prabhu down here has a question.
How could we minimize the effect of three modes of meditation? How could we minimize the effect of three modes? Sometimes in devotional service we think we are doing devotional service, but actually we are in the senses of our sense gratifications. We are indulging in sense gratification. How can we differentiate we are in goodness or devotional service or in for the sense gratification?
Yeah, it's like I was talking about changing habits. It's not going to change instantly that because we want to become devotees, all of a sudden our mind will become peaceful and we'll be able to chant and hear nicely. So in terms of minimizing the modes of nature, Krishna is explaining here that according to our association, we get that influence. Now, any parent can confirm this. If they've had the children at school, if the children have good friends at school, the children will be good. If the children get in the wrong association at school, then they will become even thieves and plunderers, just simply because of their association, because there's so much influence at a young age by what's around them. It's very clear with children as they're growing up how much they're influenced by just what's around them. And so Krishna says also, Guna Sangosya, by our association with the gunas, we get influenced. So what we can do about it is make the most of the mode of goodness and keep our association as much as possible. We know that the hours leading up until sunrise is mode of goodness. Brahma Muhurta, leading through to sunrise, is mode of goodness. Daytime is generally mode of passion, and evening time gets into the mode of ignorance. So we focus on putting our priorities of devotional service in the morning. Like we try and chant at least 12 rounds before sunrise. Some people can't do all their rounds before sunrise, depending on their services. But say at least 12 rounds should be finished before sunrise. In that way we get a good quality of chanting. I find that from practical experience that I get up early because actually the material mind is not so active early in the morning. It's easier to just chant and hear before the mind starts thinking about what I have to do today, and I should remember to do this, I should remember to do that. So in that way we can control our environment and make our devotional service a priority when the conditions are good. We try and keep good association as much as possible when we're chanting. As much as possible we try and sit in the class and listen to the class rather than sit at home and listen on the radio. But sometimes it's not possible, and I'm also guilty that in the morning I just can't get to the class, so I'm watching on the internet and listening. But if we find that the choices we're making are not working, then we have to change those choices. If I find myself falling asleep when I'm listening to class, I have to do something that I'm not going to fall asleep. Like that. We have to, like I said, in the beginning we become aware after we've done something wrong. Oh, I was sleepy and I didn't concentrate on my chanting this morning. Or my mind was all over the place because I was thinking something else. And then gradually we try and find an environment that will help us. That's what we can do. And of course, this advice from Baladev Vidyabhushan is to take shelter of the order of our spiritual master. So that may be our Diksha Guru and it may be our Siksha Guru. But this is an important way to overcome the influence of the false ego, is to take shelter of the system of authority. Krishna has given this system of authority right through from the Vedas. We have our duty to do according to Dharma. And just simply even engaging in our Dharma will give us some purification, because it's Krishna's instruction. So even just doing our duty will give us some purification. So that's why we recommended to try and do our duty and come to the mode of goodness, and not just think that we can be bhajananandis and go away and chant 24 hours a day, because then our mind will take us away. But if we control our mind by engaging in devotional service according to the instructions of Guru and Krishna, then that will help. And gradually, kramashaha, step by step, gradually, the purification will come. The main thing is we sincerely try and we never give up. Some more?
Thank you.
Thank you. Karbajana has some more.
As you were mentioning about the habits, the habits from the childhood we see when we are children and we are fighting for small things with our brothers, sisters and in school like this. As we grown up, then we understand that what we are doing that is not good. Then we change the habits. Then whatever the association we get, then the habits we get. Just like if we get a habit of a drunkard, so we go and drunk. If we get
Prabhupada talks about that.
Association of
If you want to become a drunkard, go and associate with the drunkards.
If you want to be gambler, you associate those people. So like this, we keep on changing our habits. And when we come to Krishna consciousness and we leave all those habits which we were having before. Now before we used to drink alcohol or smoke or have an association of women, illegal sex and this thing. So now when we come to Krishna consciousness, we have forgotten all those things, and that how to associate with devotees and how the things, we try to change our habits, but sometimes that habits, the old habits keeping on striking you that you have done this thing, you have done these things. This time, disturbance means Rajagun and Tamagun, they are forcing us to divert our mind in out of goodness. So if we associate and if we concentrate our mind in reading Krishna book or Bhagavad-Gita, Bhagavatam, we associate with them, then those things also can be vanished. Right.
Yes, so Baladev Vidyabhushan has given our key as being surrendering to the order of the Guru. If we surrender to the order of the Guru, that will help us overcome the modes of material nature. Good. Thank you. Thank you all very much for coming and listening, and Hare Krishna. Jai Sri Prabhupada.